Ever feel like that pressure to be perfect is just crushing? Like you're not measuring up.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into that today.
Okay.
Exploring a talk by Elder Jeffrey R. Holland.
Okay.
It's called Be Ye Therefore Perfect.
Hmm.
Eventually.
Hmm.
It was given back in 2017.
Right.
But it's so relevant for anyone who's struggling with this whole idea of perfection, no
Absolutely.
matter what your background is.
What's fascinating about this talk is how he reframes perfection.
Yeah.
It goes from something that feels impossible and
Yeah.
like a burden
Right.
to something that actually feels achievable and even kind of liberating.
Well, he starts off by addressing that big elephant in the room.
Uh-huh.
You know those scriptures that make us feel like we're constantly falling short?
Right.
Be ye therefore perfect.
Oh, yeah.
How are we even supposed to live up to that?
Right. Well, he actually uses humor to kind of point this out.
Hmm.
He brings up examples from the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, yeah.
Not just avoiding murder, but anger. Not just adultery, but even impure thoughts.
Yeah.
It's almost like those scriptures are highlighting our imperfections.
Yeah, it's like setting this impossibly high bar.
Yeah.
And then he quotes Sister Darla Isaacson,
Okay.
who said that Satan tries to make covenants feel like curses.
Right.
Have you ever felt that way? Like
Yeah.
that pressure to live up to some ideal
Yeah.
just turns into this constant self-criticism.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's not even limited to a religious context either.
Right.
Think about career goals,
Mhm.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
even personal growth.
Yeah.
How often do those high aspirations just turn into weapons
Oh,
that we
God.
use against ourselves?
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Elder Holland's like, hold on a second.
Mm-hmm.
Would God really give us a commandment
Uh-huh.
that's impossible to keep?
It's a good point.
Like, what's the purpose of that?
He's challenging us to think about the purpose of that commandment.
Right.
What if it's not a checklist? Yeah.
That we have to complete right now,
Uh-huh.
but more like a compass,
Right.
pointing us in the right direction.
I like that. It's not about instant perfection,
Right.
but about being on the right path
Yeah.
and moving forward.
And to ease the pressure even further,
Okay.
he reminds us that we're living in a world of imperfection.
Right.
We are imperfect beings.
Totally.
He even quotes President Nelson,
Okay.
who said that in this life,
Mm-hmm.
perfection is pending.
Pending.
We're not expected to have it all figured out right
Hey,
now.
that's a relief.
Right.
But then he takes it a step further,
Right.
suggesting that instead of feeling condemned by God's perfection,
Mm-hmm.
we can actually be inspired by it.
Yeah, it's a subtle but profound shift.
Yeah.
He uses the example of God loving his enemies.
Right.
He even acknowledges that sometimes we are the enemy.
Right.
Not in a judgmental way,
No.
but just as a very human reality.
Yeah.
We all mess up.
Yeah, we do. But we can look to God as the ultimate example of what we're striving for.
So it's about recognizing our imperfections,
Yes.
but not letting them define us.
Exactly.
We're all on this journey towards something better.
And that journey is a gradual process.
Okay.
He quotes a scripture
Mm-hmm.
that talks about the gospel being for the perfecting of the saints.
Right.
But the key phrase there is till we come
Yeah.
unto a perfect man.
Right.
It's about growth, progress,
Mm-hmm.
not overnight transformation.
That's such an important reminder,
Yeah,
especially for those of us who are prone to self-criticism.
absolutely.
It's okay to be a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
It's the journey that matters.
And that journey becomes a lot smoother
Yeah.
when we understand the role of grace.
Okay.
He emphasizes that true perfection
Yeah.
is a gift from God,
Right.
something we receive through Christ,
Right.
not something we earn through self-punishment.
He even quotes Moroni,
Yes.
who says, "Love God with all your might, mind, and strength. Then by his grace, ye may be perfect in Christ."
It completely flips the script.
It really does.
Instead of striving through gritted teeth,
Yeah.
it's about striving with a sense of hope and trust in God's grace.
Okay, so think about it this way.
Okay.
If you were carrying a heavy load
Right.
and someone offered to help you carry it,
Yeah.
would you refuse and insist on doing it all yourself?
That's a good point.
That's kind of what we're doing when we reject grace. We're
Right.
saying, no, thanks God,
Yeah.
I can handle this crushing weight of perfection on my own.
That's a powerful analogy.
Grace is like that helping hand,
Yeah.
lifting some of the weight
Mm-hmm.
so we can keep moving forward.
So how do we practically apply that to this idea of perfection?
Right.
Well, he uses a parable to illustrate this.
Okay.
The parable of the debts.
Okay.
It's the story of a servant who's forgiven this massive debt by his king.
All right.
And when we're talking like billions of dollars in today's money.
Right.
But then that same servant turns around and refuses to forgive a fellow servant a tiny debt,
Okay.
like $100.
Oh.
The difference is just staggering.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the point.
Right.
This isn't about literal money.
Right.
It's about our spiritual debt to God.
Okay.
We've been forgiven something immeasurable,
Yeah.
and yet we often get so hung up on our own tiny failings, and we refuse to extend that forgiveness to ourselves and to others.
Okay, so how does this parable connect back to the idea of perfection then?
Well, it highlights the difference between God's perfection.
Okay.
That 10,000 talent level
Yeah.
of complete and total perfection,
Right.
and the 100 pence level of perfection
That's
that we
good.
can strive for right now.
So we're not expected to be perfect on a divine scale
Right.
in this very moment.
Yeah,
But we can still make progress in smaller, more manageable ways.
exactly. And those smaller steps still move us toward Christ-likeness.
Yeah.
He even gives some concrete example. Think about being a bit more forgiving today, a bit more patient, a bit kinder.
Yeah.
And not suddenly perfect,
Right.
but you're moving in the right direction.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off and makes it feel so
Yeah.
much more doable.
Yeah.
And those small acts of improvement, those 100-pence efforts,
Right.
those are what really matter in the end.
Absolutely. But there's a danger here that he warns about,
Okay.
something he calls toxic perfectionism.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. What did you mean by that?
He was talking about the kind of perfectionism that makes us and everyone around us miserable.
Okay.
It sets impossible standards
Uh-huh.
and leads to constant self-criticism and judgment of others.
Right.
It's the kind of perfectionism that just sucks the joy out of life.
So it's like permission to let go of those unrealistic expectations.
Yes.
Both for ourselves and for those around us.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that striving for improvement doesn't have to be about beating ourselves up
Wow.
over every mistake.
I love that. It feels so freeing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I can mess up.
Yeah.
I can learn
Yeah.
and keep moving forward without this weight of perfect on my shoulders.
Exactly. And to really drive that point home,
Okay.
he shares this fascinating story about Leo Tolstoy and a priest.
Okay, let's hold that story for part 2.
Sounds good.
I'm already feeling so inspired
Yeah.
by this whole reframing of perfection.
Yeah.
It's not some unattainable ideal, but a process.
Yes.
A journey we're on with grace as our guide.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect place to pause
Okay.
for our listeners to reflect on what we've covered so far.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into the idea of perfection. Right before the break, we were about to hear Elder Holland's story about Leo Tolstoy and a priest.
Yeah, this story really gets to the heart of what we've been talking about, progress over perfection.
Okay, so set the scene for us. What's happening in this story?
So Tolstoy writes about this priest who is being criticized
Yeah.
for not perfectly living up to his own teachings. And people are basically saying, well, if you can't even follow your own rules, then maybe your rules are wrong.
Ouch.
Mm.
That's a tough position to be in. How does the priest respond?
He acknowledges his imperfections. He's like, look at my life now compared to how I used to live.
Okay.
You can see I'm at least trying to live out what I teach.
Yeah,
He's admitting that he hasn't achieved some flawless state,
right.
but that he's on the right path.
And then he uses this striking image to describe his progress.
Yes. He compares himself to someone walking the right path, but doing it drunkenly, staggering from side to side.
Wow.
It's such a vivid image.
It is.
And it really captures the reality of our human journey, doesn't it?
Totally.
Right.
We're all going to stumble along the way.
Yeah.
It's not about perfectly executing every step,
Right.
but about the overall direction we're heading in.
And that's what Elder Holland wants us to remember.
Yeah.
Don't get so caught up in your own imperfections or the imperfections of others that you become cynical about the whole journey.
Right.
We're all striving. We're all learning.
Yeah.
And that's something to celebrate.
He even uses himself as an example,
Yes.
saying that he continues to strive clumsily and give thanks inadequately.
Right.
You don't often hear that kind of vulnerability from spiritual leaders.
It's so powerful.
It is.
It normalizes the struggle.
Right.
It gives us permission to be perfectly imperfect.
It's like he's saying, hey, I'm not perfect either,
Right.
but I'm still showing up, still trying my best.
Yeah.
And that's what God asks of us.
And that brings us back to the whole point of this deep dive.
Yeah.
Reframing perfection.
Okay.
It's not about never making a mistake, but about embracing the journey with all its messiness.
Right.
It's about progress. It's about grace. And it's about giving ourselves permission to stumble along the way.
So what does this all mean for someone listening right now who's
Uh-huh.
really struggling with this idea of perfection?
Well, I hope it offers a sense of relief. That pressure to have it all figured out,
Yeah.
to never mess up,
Right.
that can be paralyzing.
It can.
But what if God isn't expecting that from us?
Hmm.
What if he's more interested in our efforts
Okay.
than our flawless execution?
It's like permission to exhale and say, okay,
Yes.
I'm a work in progress.
Right.
I'm on the journey.
Yeah,
And that's enough.
exactly. And the second thing I hope it does is empower you to focus on those 100-pence areas of improvement.
Okay.
Think about one small thing you can do today to be a little kinder,
Uh-huh.
a little more patient,
Right.
a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this huge, dramatic gesture.
Right.
Those small acts of love and service,
Yeah.
those are what truly move us closer to Christ.
And they're what make the journey so much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. It's not about this grim, relentless pursuit of perfection,
Yeah.
but about taking those small steps and finding joy in the process.
When you do inevitably stumble.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, we all do. Remember that image of the staggering saint?
Yes.
Even if you're not walking perfectly,
Right.
as long as you're on the right path,
Mm-hmm.
you're making progress.
But what about those times when we slip into that toxic perfectionism that Elder Holland talks about?
Right.
How do we break free from that cycle of self-criticism and judgment?
Starts with awareness.
Yes.
Pay attention to your self-talk.
Right.
Are you constantly berating yourself?
Hmm.
Setting unrealistic expectations?
Yeah.
Comparing yourself to others and coming up short?
Uh-huh.
Notice those patterns
Mm-hmm.
and then challenge them.
Exactly.
So when you catch yourself thinking, I'm not good enough, I messed up again.
Yeah.
I should be further along by now.
Right.
What do you do?
Ask yourself, is this thought helpful?
Okay.
Is it kind?
Uh-huh.
Is it realistic? If the answer is no,
Yeah.
then try replacing it with something more compassionate.
Okay.
Remind yourself that you're a work in progress,
Mm-hmm.
that mistakes are part of the process, and that you're worthy of love and acceptance even when you fall short.
It's like retraining our brains to be more forgiving and encouraging towards ourselves.
And gratitude can be a powerful tool in this process.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you find yourself spiraling into self-criticism,
Right.
shift your focus to what you're grateful for.
Okay.
It could be something as simple as a warm cup of coffee or a beautiful sunset.
Yeah.
Focusing on the good helps us to appreciate what we have and to take the pressure off the need to be perfect.
It's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
When we're focused on what we lack,
Right.
we miss out on the beauty and abundance that's already present in our lives.
And finally, remember that perfection is a journey, not a destination.
Mm.
It's a lifelong process of learning, growing, and becoming more like Christ.
Right.
Embrace the ups and downs, celebrate the small victories, and be patient with yourself along the way.
So instead of getting discouraged by our imperfections,
Yeah.
we can actually see them as opportunities for growth. Each stumble becomes a chance to learn something new, to try a different approach,
Yeah.
to deepen our reliance on grace.
And speaking of grace, that's the key that unlocks this whole idea of perfection. It's not something we earn. It's a gift that's freely given.
Right.
And when we accept that gift, it takes the pressure off and allows us to enjoy the journey.
It's like having a divine safety net,
Yes.
knowing that even when we fall, we're caught, we're loved, and we're empowered to keep going.
And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
Imagine you're carrying a heavy load, and God is right there beside you, offering to share the weight.
Okay.
Would you refuse his help? Would you insist on doing it all alone?
Yeah.
Or would you accept his grace and allow him to lighten your burden?
That's such a powerful image. We're not in this alone.
Right.
We have divine help available to us every step of the way.
Exactly.
And that makes all the difference, doesn't it?
It changes everything. It takes the pressure off, it infuses the journey with joy, and it allows us to make progress without being crushed by the weight of our own expectations.
And I think that's the perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground, but we have one more segment left in this deep dive. We'll be back after a short break to explore Elder Holland's powerful concluding message and leave you with a thought-provoking question to ponder. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been unpacking this whole idea of perfection. and how it can actually be this freeing journey
Yeah.
of becoming more like Christ.
Right. Instead of this impossible standard that we feel like we can never reach.
Right.
We've seen how Elder Holland really emphasizes grace over self-criticism, focusing on those small, manageable 100-pence acts of improvement
Right.
instead of getting bogged down by this need to be perfect right now.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
let's hear how Elder Holland wraps up his message.
All right. So in his conclusion, he reminds us that even though we're striving for perfection, we're not going to achieve it in its fullness here in this life.
Okay.
True perfection, in the New Testament sense of the word,
Right.
is something that will be finished and complete in eternity.
So it's not about reaching some endpoint in this life,
Right.
but about continuing to progress, to
Yeah.
grow,
Yeah.
to become more Christ-like
Exactly.
throughout our entire journey, even beyond mortality.
Absolutely. And that ongoing process is made possible through
Yeah.
the atonement of Jesus Christ,
Right.
which he describes as this unfathomable gift given at an incomprehensible cost.
You know, sometimes we get so caught up
Yeah.
in trying to earn our way to perfection
Right.
that we totally forget about the role of grace.
Yeah. It's not about gritting our teeth and white-knuckling our way there.
Right. It's about accepting that gift and allowing it to transform us.
And what's so beautiful is he doesn't just talk about this theoretically, he shares his own experience,
Yeah.
saying that he continues to strive clumsily and give thanks inadequately.
I love that he's willing to be so vulnerable.
Right.
That makes it feel so much more approachable
Yeah.
and relatable.
It does.
He's basically saying, look, I'm not perfect either, but I'm still showing up,
Right.
still trying,
Yeah.
still relying on grace.
And that's what makes this message so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It normalizes the struggle,
Right.
reminds us that we're not alone in this.
Yeah. It's like he's extending a hand and saying, come on, let's walk this path together.
Yeah.
We'll stumble, we'll make mistakes,
Right.
but we'll keep moving forward with grace as our guide.
And to really drive home that point,
Yeah.
he ends with this incredible image of Jesus
Okay.
with nail-scarred hands,
Wow.
extending grace to us, holding on to us, encouraging us along the way.
It's such a powerful visual.
It is.
It just speaks to that unconditional love and support
Yes.
that's available to us no matter where we are on our journey.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I hope you walk away with this understanding. Okay.
Perfection is not about some unattainable standard,
Right.
but about embracing the journey of becoming more like Christ.
Yeah.
It's about progress over perfection, grace over self-criticism,
Right.
and recognizing that we are not alone in this.
We're not in this alone. And to really make this personal for you listening right now,
Okay.
we want to leave you with a question to ponder.
Okay.
What are your 100-pence areas for improvement? What's one small step you can take today to be a little kinder, a little more patient, a little more forgiving?
Right.
And how can you invite more grace into your own journey toward becoming more like Christ?
Such good questions.
Remember, perfection is a process, not a destination. Embrace the journey, celebrate the progress,
Yes.
and let grace be your guide.
Beautiful.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the idea of perfection.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.